o'clock here, so we've been up since a little after 4. So, the time doesn't change over here. So anyway, that's what you call dedication. We just wanted to be with you all this morning. And if you can see these beautiful flowers, we cut them out for the bush out front. So if we get put in jail over here at Maui, we all come get us out, but we are going to request a window that overlooks the ocean, and so maybe that won't be such a bad deal. But anyway, we are having a great time. Our friend Cindy, we came over here mainly for her. She's been here, we've been coming over here for about 30 years. And this will probably be her last time because of her loss of hearing and her vision. And so she asked us to come because she couldn't come by herself. So anyway, someone had to do it. Oh well, here we are in Maui, but it's been a delightful trip, and we'll be home Sunday. So we've been talking about eating disorders. This is the last part of eating disorders, and it's what we're going to talk about is recovery. What does recovery look like? And then how can the family best support someone with an eating disorder? So I want to go through this about what recovery looks like. We've been talking a lot about the disease. The disease, it has a physical component. It's almost straight down the line in many ways like alcoholism and drug addiction, because it does affect the brain and the body. It has a hereditary factor to it, and it also is progressive, and it also is fatal left untreated. So it has a physical component, and it has that mental and emotional side, and the main problem lies in the mind. People that are overweight can go to Weight Watchers. That's a great program. If that's all you want is to lose weight, it works. But that's just addressing the physical. If you have an eating disorder, just losing the weight or gaining the weight, that takes care of the physical part, which is, that's a lot. But the main problem lies between the two ears. It is the mental and emotional side. And if we don't address that, what happens is, and we see it all the time, people will have the bariatric surgery. They will get on the meds. They will get on, find any way, and I did. I'd found any way in the world to lose weight, and I could lose weight on all the different ways that I tried. In the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it talks about, and it lists the ways that alcoholics have tried to sober up. Well, if they had to make a book for those of us with eating disorders, or the things that we tried, the volume would be so thick we could hardly carry it, because most of us with eating disorders, well, there's Mr. Bradley. Good morning. He's home convalescing from surgery and got a good report, and he's growing himself a beard. So good to see you. So eating disorders, like I said, are much like the disease of alcoholism, but the difference is, we have to deal with our substance every day. And so you flip that and look at it from a different point of view. We get to eat, our substance 3 times a day. And there's over 240 different types of wonderful food out there. We have lots of food choices. Food is not the problem. Weight is not the problem. That is but a symptom of the problem. The problem lies between our 2 ears. It is, and I keep saying that, mental and emotional. So how to recover from it? First of all, you need to uh, to get diagnosed. And people with eating disorders and alcoholism and drug addiction, yes, we can get good diagnosis from physicians, from psychiatrists, from therapists, but it's really a self-diagnosis. We have absolutely got to admit we have this disease. If we don't admit that we have it, we will not treat it. So each one of us have got to diagnose ourselves. And then you go to a good therapist, a good psychiatrist, someone that is trained in the eating disorder field. You've got to get with people who understand eating disorders. And there's a lot of good therapists out there that are not trained in eating disorders, and you're wasting your time to go to them, because it's not that they're withholding information from you. They don't know. They do not know what direction to take you in if they haven't had the training. And if you can find a good therapist that is also in recovery, they don't have to be in recovery, but that does help if they have, their own story to tell you, and then the initials behind their name also. But they don't have to have had an eating disorder in order to be a good eating disorder therapist. So to get a good diagnosis, get with a trained mental health therapist, and then go to a physician and listen to them, but also go to someone that understands eating disorders. Physicians as a whole do not like to treat folks like us, because one thing, we don't follow directions. When I weighed almost 300 pounds, I'd go to the doctor and he'd hand me a piece of paper that had, because they didn't know, I'm not finding fault with them, they didn't know. And, they'd hand me a piece of paper with 1,000 calorie diet on it and say, go and stay on this diet and come back in 30 days. Well, a lot of times I would, and I'd lose, not in a month, but 6 months, I'd lose 100, 120, 130, 40 pounds, but I could never keep it off. I could not ever keep it off, because I didn't know it was a twofold illness. I did not know it had a mental and emotional component. I just thought it was all physical. So first thing is get a good diagnosis. And at the bottom line, we do have to diagnose ourselves. Gosh, I look like a pinhead. I can see myself. I'm not looking too good this morning. And I've cleaned up and put on this dress to look better for y'all. But anyway, all righty. Because I've been wearing a bathing suit and a cover up all week. I started just had that on. That might have looked just as good, who knows. All right, but I'm not vain at all. No, I'm not vain. All right, so get a good diagnosis. And I say this kind of lightly. Once you get a good diagnosis, you might want to go to a nutritionist. Now, I will tell you, most eating disorder people know more than a nutrition or a dietitian knows about food. I mean, they've made it their life's work to, if you want to know about food, you just sit down and talk to an anorexic. I mean, they know, they can tell you every calorie count. So sometimes it is helpful to go to a nutritionist or to a dietitian to get a good meal plan. Not a diet. Diets don't work. We go on a diet so we can go off of it. So, a good meal plan. But make sure they have been trained in eating disorders. It still amazes me that dietitians and nutritionists, majority of the time, are not trained in eating disorders. And so what a dietitian wants you to do is to eat, certain food, which is great. If you want to go to a dietitian, go to a dietitian. And sometimes it can be helpful, particularly for your anorexics. But anyway, anorexics know usually more about food than a dietitian, because they've made it their life's work to check out what, is, how many calories is in everything. So anyway, another thing is to educate yourself about the disease. You must know what you're dealing with. Is educate yourself about the disease. And the disease, there's lots of forms of eating disorders, but the primary is binge eating, which binge eating can turn to morbid obesity. Morbid obesity is, we used to say, 100 pounds overweight. Today it's considered the go off the BMI, but if you're morbid obese because you're carrying that excess weight around. So binge eating, compulsive overeating, that is on the side of the weight gainers, the overweight. And then there's the anorexic side where they, don't eat, where they, severely restrict their food. And then bulimia is where they binge eat and then find a way to get rid of the food. A lot of your bulimics are also anorexic, so that's bulimorexit, and not all of them, but a lot of them can turn to anorexia. So get a good diagnosis, look at and most eating disorder people have practiced all three of the eating disorders in their career at some time. So you get a good history about about the eating disorders, and then you get with a good clinician to see where you are in the disease and what type of treatment do you need. This is our show. This is Shades of Hope, so I would tell you what you need to do. I would recommend. And I would have given anything, if I had something like this to go to, because I would have gone. I went everywhere looking for help before I found help. So what I'm saying is if you're going to recover from an eating disorder, you've got to detox first. You're going to have to detox from the eating disorder behavior, just like an alcoholic drug addict must detox before they can even get into recovery. Now, I've worked with alcoholics and drug addicts for 50 years. Now, they'd much rather try to recover while drinking or using. It doesn't quite work like that, and that's the same with eating disorders. So you're going to have to get detoxed. And one of the things that I would recommend is to come to one of our intensives here, because you're going to be put on a meal plan, you're going to be shown how to eat, but also you're going to work on the root cause of what is driving the eating disorder. There is much more to it than the food issue. It's that core pain. And during that intensive, we help people get to that core pain. And, in 5 days, you can't do it all, but you can do a lot of work in 5 days. Plus, you can detox from the food, and you can get on a good meal plan. I'd have given anything if there'd been something like that around when I would have gone, because I was searching for help. So, educate yourself about the disease, detox. You can't do anything till you detox from the disease, and you've got to get the disordered eating must get in order. Now that just sounds so simple. Is it simple, Kim? It's not simple. It is like everything. It's not just the food has to change. it's everything in your life has to change when you start treating an eating disorder or alcoholism or drug addiction, because you know what we say, you have to change playpens, playmates, and playthings. You got to live a little different life. and and another thing with eating disorders, if you can get in good recovery from an eating disorder, and if you don't get help from, you know, on that mental and emotional side, we see it all the time, well, switch addictions. You know, in many of your eating disorder people across the board, it's more with the bulimics, but it can be across the board. Once they get in good recovery from an eating disorder, maybe they're binge eaters, maybe they've lost 100 pounds. One of the things they have to really watch is they can switch over to alcohol. But now your binge eaters, when they switch addictions, I'll tell you what they switch addictions to is love and sex addiction. We see it all the time in some, because if you're carrying around a lot of excess weight and then you lose it and you start feeling good about yourself and you get lots of compliments and you get frisky, and a lot of times people will switch over to love and sex addiction, or they will switch over to alcohol. And so particularly people that have had the bariatric surgery, the likelihood, the percentage of becoming alcoholic is about 35% of those who have had the bariatric surgery turn to alcohol and become alcoholic, and they become instant alcoholics because the metabolism has changed. And it's so all of these things, it's really important to look at. But recovery, you must detox from the behavior before you can really start into recovery. And then find what we recommend is to find right off a support group, and we recommend Overeaters Anonymous, and that is for anorexics, bulimics, and overeaters. It covers all of it. There is EDA, Eating Disorder Anonymous, and there's different eating disorder 12-step programs, but the one that's been around the longest is Overeaters Anonymous. But find you a support group. Find you a group of people that have been through what you've been through or going through, and it is that one person reaching out to another one, and for free. I mean, it doesn't cost anything, and you can hear someone and when someone has had the same kind of disease that you have, because they will start sharing from the heart. What comes from the heart goes to the heart, and what comes from the head a lot of times goes right over the head. So you can go to professionals, which is wonderful. We recommend that. But if you're not careful what they say to you, unless they're recovering themselves, it'll just go right over your head. You won't even pay much attention to it. But when you sit down with another eating disorder person that shares from their heart and talks about how sick they got and what happened and how they found help and how they are today, that is recovery, folks. That is going to help you more than all the good therapists in the world. And I am for therapists, so don't say I'm against them. I'm not. But the main support that you're going to get is from people that have had this disease and are in recovery for it. So then let's look at the family. Let me finish about the things to do, about the OA, about getting support. That is very, very important in a support group. Now, you're also, by this time, you're finding you a good therapist, an eating disorder specialist, and they will guide you along if you are honest. And most eating disorder people, alcoholics and drug addicts, first rattle out of the box, we're not honest. We withhold information from professionals. It's almost like, well, you guess at what's wrong with me. But if you go to someone that really knows about eating disorders, they're going to see through your BS. They're going to see through it, and they can guide you better. But if you go to someone that doesn't understand eating disorders, you will be able to pull the wool over their eyes, and you can get all that medication, and I'm not against this new medication. I'm for anything that might help someone, but the medication alone does not do it. And I could spend an hour talking about all these new meds. And the minute they go off of the medication, they start putting the weight back on because nothing's changed. And if something doesn't change, nothing changes. If something doesn't change, nothing changes. And so I have seen them, and like I said, if those beds had been available when I was, 130, 40 pounds overweight, you bet I'd be in line to get them also, and even though I'd have been afraid of the shot, I would have put it in my belly. I would have done anything to lose weight. But that's not the answer. That can get you started. And it's really designed, the medication, the weight loss, Ozempic, is a great medication as far as we know so far. And that it was designed, Denmark has some of the best. They research, when they come out with a drug, you can know that it's going to be researched before it ever goes on the market. And it was designed for diabetics, simply diabetics. It was not for weight loss. It was diabetics. And it has helped so many diabetics. But now, if you've got the money and you have 5 pounds that you need to lose, you can get that medication. And I can get a little angry about that, because then there's folks like my son-in-law, for instance, has had severe diabetes, and he's been on the shot. He's lost 100 pounds, but then they run out of the medication, and he has to go a month or two without getting it, because people that are trying to lose 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds, and they have the money, that's the key. They have the money to buy these meds, and they can get them. And I'm gone to preaching, I'm off on something. But looking at the meds, that is not the secret for the weight loss industry. It is not. It is one more thing to try, one more thing. Now, if you are seeing an eating disorder specialist, let's say you're 100 pounds overweight, and the doctor has recommended the shot or the weight loss meds for you, do that, but also treat that mental and emotional side. And go to OA, get you a sponsor, worth the steps, because we believe that is the solution. It is a spiritual problem. In that, when we have any addiction, the substance becomes the God of our understanding, whether it's food, alcohol, or drugs. That's what we began to worship. So, all right, with families, let's look at how can families support their loved one. One of the things is get off their back, quit nagging them, get out of their way and go on with your own life. Love them, let them know that you love them, and stay out of their plate, stay out of the eating disorders plate, unless they're adolescents, unless they're children. Now, this is a whole new concept. It's not new, it's been around. Really, this idea was floated in the early 80s. It started in London by a group of eating disorder therapists over there. And there has been a book written for parents of adolescents, and I cannot remember the name of the book, and we're going to put that out whenever I get home and can remember the name of the book. It is the best. See, in treating adolescents for anorexia, and particularly anorexia, but anorexia and bulimia and the overeating, there's been this this idea that floats around that it is the mother's fault or the parent's fault. This is a no-fault disease. Yes, parents, we contribute to everything about our kids. We make a contribution, good, bad, and indifferent, but we do not cause the disease. It is a disease. It's not just a behavior. Now, if you have an adolescent that has an eating disorder, what we recommend is to get this book, and we're going to put it on when I get home. I can't remember the name of it, but I'll tell you, it's a different approach. And the approach is the parents take charge of the meals and the refeeding. And I'll tell you, Kim and I have worked with 3 different families, and it is a different type of program, a concept altogether, in that you begin to feed that adolescent like you did when they were infants. The parents take charge of the refeeding process. Like I said, we've worked with 3 families with this concept. And it works, folks, but you've got to get the family on board. You've got to get the father on board. You've got to get whoever lives in that household. So these 3, and it amazes us the progress that these young women have made, but it's due to the parents being willing to do this process. So one thing, depending on, and these happen to be very ill anorexics, and so they had already withdrawn them from school. So this process works best, homeschool them for a while. And what happened here is, what we recommend is that one parent be with the adolescent at all times. And the parents take charge of the food. It's shades of hope when we're refeeding someone. We are in charge of their food, and they do not, they have no choice at it. If they're going to be in treatment, they're going to have to feed themselves. But we're in charge of it, and that's where the parents, this concept is the parents take the lead, and this is so contradictory to what we learned years ago. We learned take hands off, let them, but I'm talking about adolescents. I'm not talking about grown adults. But I have been amazed by these 3 families, and they came, and Kim and I worked with them for, it seems like it's all 3s, but anyway, we worked with them, did a 3-day workshop with them, just that family and their adolescent that had an eating disorder. And we would do it again. It is it is a blessing to work with a family that is this dedicated to helping a child with an eating disorder. And if you can get that father in there, and we wouldn't do it without the mother and the father, you're wasting your time. You're wasting your time if you do it with just one parent. If they have two parents, both of those parents have got to be involved. Grandparents can be involved, because what you're going to do is you're going to take over refeeding that child, that adolescent. You prepare the meals, you fix their plate, you sit down with them, and this whole process takes about a year. And I mean, it's almost year to the day, because the first, they fight it tooth and toenail. But once they start, what I recommend is if they come and work with someone that understands this process. So we worked with the daughter and the parents of each of these families. We worked with them very intense, and then we kept in touch with them like twice a week by phone. And it amazed us, the miracles that we saw with these young women and what they are wanting. You know what they're wanting? They are wanting that mother and dad's attention. And so when you take over that refeeding process and you take charge of that, and it's not an easy task. It is a battle at every meal. It is a battle. But when you get the parents working on their stuff, they're doing their own therapy over here, and then the kids got their therapist, and then you do that joint therapy. I'll tell you, the process works. And we've got two in particular that were in sports. I mean, good enough. I mean, really good at sports. Well, they lost that ability to play sports because of the anorexia. And I want to report they are back into playing tennis, doing the sports that they want to, the swimming or whatever they do. And that's where we want to get people to, is back into their lives. So, but now when they pass that adolescence, it's none of your business. They're on their own. I mean, you support them, you care about them, but they are not interested in usually hearing anything that parents have to say. So for family members, get your own help. Get your own help. If you have, keep my time. Do you know what time it is?
10:30.
Okay. So I can't remember where.
33.
Huh?
Go ahead. 10:33. 5:33 here.
Okay. So what was I talking
You're good.
about? What was that last thought you have to keep? All
I
right.
forgot.
For
Get your own help.
the what?
Parent needs to get their own help.
Yes, parents need to get their own help, because it is difficult to sit back and watch a child die a day at a time. And if you've got a child or an adolescent, and I'll tell you, eating disorders are going down younger and younger and younger and younger. And so if you have a child that's suffering from any of the eating disorders, get help yourself. Educate yourself about the disease and get help yourself, because you've got a hard row to hoe in front of you. I mean, it's difficult to have your own eating disorder, let alone to have a child. And I can speak to that because, my daughter Kim, and I have her permission to share, but my daughter Kim, when I went to treatment, they sent her to the treatment center in LA where I was, because she tried to kill herself. They didn't know what to do with her, so they sent her out to where I was. And she came in, she's 5'10" and weighed 97 pounds. We didn't know anything about anorexia. We did not know about eating disorders other than I was dying from one and she was dying from one. They diagnosed her out there. We contributed her weight loss to the drugs and alcohol that she was doing. But it was a freestanding disease of its own. It was called anorexia. 97 pounds, 5'10". And she refused help. And you can't give someone something if they don't want it. She refused help. I finished out my treatment and I came home, and they called later and said we're discharging her because she would not get help. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but that went on for years and years and years and years. It's eating disorders are a whole lot like drugs and alcohol. Sometimes they won't let you die, but they won't let you live. You just keep hanging on, and by the grace of God and a lot of effort on her part and support from her family, she has been in recovery for I think it's 14 years. Good recovery. You know, she had good recovery 30 years ago and then 20 years ago, but my daughter was a chronic relapser. And so, speaking from a parent, I'll tell you, it's much easier to have had my own eating disorder and treat my own eating disorder than watch my daughter die a day at a time, because it's a powerless feeling. You cannot do anything. You cannot, particularly when they're adults. So get your own help. Get your own help. And that's what I had to do. And I saw a therapist. I've been seeing a therapist before I went to treatment. And I changed therapists when I came back, because the one I was going to, she did her best, but she had no training in eating disorders. Back in those days, there wasn't many people trained in eating disorders. But anyway, I found a new therapist. And what we did is I had a 3-hour appointment with her, and we had a funeral for my daughter, Kim. And it was one of the most painful things that I have ever gone through. I had to completely give up my daughter. I had to put her in God's hands, because I knew I couldn't do anything for her. I had tried everything that I knew, and it wasn't working. And so, for my own self-preservation, for my own, treating my own eating disorder, I had to let her go. I had to let her go. And it's not easy. It's not easy. And part of that was asking her to leave her home. And, think about it, 5'10", 97 pounds, and asking her to leave her home. And, she was causing chaos in every area of her life and everyone's life around her. And so that was not easy. That was very hard. And had my husband and I not been in 12-step programs ourselves and had our own sponsors to support us, we could not have done that. And so what we did is that I gave her a dinner party and invited some of her friends and our recovering community, and she hated every second of it. She later said, "Why don't you just throw my junk out in the front yard and keep my rear end out?" But we wanted to do it in a healthy way, so we celebrated her by giving her a dinner party, and I had this red plate. It says "You're special." We let her eat off the red plate, and then we invited her to leave our home. We changed all the locks on our doors, and she's never lived in our home since then. And if you think that's easy, it was one of the hardest things we've ever done, because it was like we were giving her up to death. But I'll tell you, drug addicts, alcoholics, anorexics, eating disorder people, we're pretty resilient people, and she was resilient, and she was very ill and stayed very ill for a long time. And I would do it again. I would do it again. And it didn't even end with that. Later on, because of some circumstances, her threatening to kill herself and all, I admitted her to a state hospital, and she hated my guts for that for years. She would not see me, she would not talk to me, but I had to look at, am I willing to do the hard stuff to keep her alive? And I'll tell you, it's not the way to win friends and influence people is to put them in a state hospital. She went a long time without speaking to me. She told her dad she would let her dad go see her, and her dad would go see her, and then he'd come home and report to me. What she said was that you better hide that bitch, because when I get out of here, I'm going to kill her. And she hated me. And I cared, and it hurt my heart, but I was more willing to do the hard stuff. And her dad wouldn't sign the commitment papers, but anyway, I just wanted to keep my daughter alive until she could find some help. And we didn't know anything about anorexia back then. We knew nothing, zero. So I've been on both sides of this. I've had the eating disorder myself, and I've had watched a family member almost die from it. I'll tell you, the hardest part is watching a child. So for parents, get your own help. Educate yourself about the disease. Educate yourself about what you're dealing with. But I can't stress enough, go to OA meetings and sit and listen, because those people are going to educate you. When you hear their stories, you're going to hear that you didn't cause the disease, you can't cure the disease. You didn't cause it, you can't cure it, and you can't control it. Go to Al-Anon. Al-Anon is for family members of alcoholics. But they will welcome you. I've never known an Al-Anon group that turned away anyone that had a child or a family member that had an eating disorder. You go and sit in Al-Anon and listen to those folks, how they recover, whether the alcoholic recovers or not. The family has a right to their own freedom and a right to their own life. And it sounds like it's all about me. It's not. I started Al-Anon in 1968, October of 1968, because I was nuts. I was crazy. I had lived with alcoholics forever and always, and the only way I knew to handle it was to eat. And so I was pretty much at my biggest when I started Al-Anon. And they didn't have OA then, but I went to Al-Anon, and what that helped me so much in that, to get off of their back, to get out of their way and go on with my own life. And when I heard that, and I remember saying it, I didn't know about sponsors or anything, but this woman walked up. I went to Al-Anon several times, very shy, couldn't even say my name. And this woman walked up to me, and her husband was in the Air Force. They had transferred to Abilene, the only reason she was in West Texas. And she came up to me one day and she said, "Do you have a sponsor?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You do now." And that woman took me under her wing, and she taught me the Al-Anon program. And she taught me to put my husband and my mother and my daughter in God's hands every morning and leave them there. And, I'm a visual person, so I started visualizing this big old red overstuffed chair, red velvet, beautiful chair. And I put Jesus, God, in that chair. And every morning I would put my husband and my mother and my daughter in the lap of God every morning. And I'd visualize that. Then I'd get up off my knees and go about my day. And every time that they would come to mind, I think, nope, they're not mine. I've put them in God's lap this morning. And so I had to do things like that to know that it was okay for me to recover, because I was, killing 3 good addicts by loving them to death. You can over-love an addict. So families, get your own help. And sometimes, it is sad, but sometimes addicts die. there's three things that's going to happen to an addict. They're either going to wind up in some kind of institution, mental institution, treatment center after treatment center, or jail. They're going to, and I will tell you this, and we don't talk a lot about this with eating disorder people. One of the advanced symptoms of eating disorders is stealing, is theft. I mean, we become like a grabber person, and you try to grab stuff from outside and bring it in to make yourself feel better. I had a beloved, and she would not care for me telling you this. She passed away the year before my husband did. My friend Kathy, beloved friend, she was a physician in Georgia, in Atlanta, in the northern part of Georgia, well known in the field. And she died of an eating disorder. She'd get in periods of recovery and she'd relapse, get in periods of recovery and relapse. And she was arrested in Neiman Marcus for shoplifting. Now, she could have paid for what she got. It's not about the need. It's not about needing something. It's about trying to find something to fill up the hole in the soul. And when she called me from the jail in Atlanta, Georgia, I mean, can you imagine this cute, beautiful, blonde, classy woman in jail for shoplifting? That is a symptom of eating disorders, folks. And I forget that's a big symptom of eating disorders, is shoplifting. It's anything to bring in something out here inside ourselves to make ourselves feel better. I was about this time, but I was, well, no, it was earlier than that. It was probably 64, 65. I had 3 little babies, and I, was the biggest. I think I weighed, I don't know, probably close to 300, and wore like a 28 and a half dress. And you couldn't find clothes, for my size. I had to have just about everything made. But I remember being in Penny's. I'm telling on myself here. This is 4-step stuff. But I was in Penny's one day. I did not have the money to buy this dress, but I found a dress that would fit over this huge body. And it was back when it was a flannel type thing, and then they backed it with a thin coating of foam rubber. I mean, you probably remember that, and it gave it sizing, So anyway, I had those 3 babies, and we were all in the dressing room. I was trying that on, and it fit. And so I had this big old diaper bag. I didn't have money to pay for that dress. And this was before they did that Bing stuff at the door, where the bells go off when you walk out. That was way before then. I stuffed that big old dress in that diaper bag, and I took it home with me. I shoplifted a dress in front of those 3 babies. Of course, they were babies. So when I got home, the guilt set in. And then it was about 6 o'clock. I was waiting for my husband to come home, and I heard a news report. Something came up on the news. I thought they were talking about me. I mean, I was so self-centered. I thought, they're going to put my picture on the 6 o'clock news. But anyway, I knew that I couldn't keep that dress, and I couldn't throw it away in the garbage can. I mean, I'm talking about a huge dress, 28 at least, size 28 and a half. So I cut that sucker up, that dress up, and I was going to flush it down the commode. Well, it had that foam rubber backing on it. I'd flush it, it'd come back. I'd flush it. I'll tell you, I had to take that sucker out to the backyard, and I buried that dress. Now, you've heard my part of my 4th and 5th step, but we do crazy things in this disease. We're like a grabber person. And shoplifting is one of the symptoms of eating disorders that probably we don't talk about enough, really. It's anything that might ease the pain of living. That's what we're looking for. All right, so I want to get back on the family. Take care of yourself, get your own therapist, because you're dealing with a disease that is deadly. It absolutely, people can recover from it, but death is one of the options. We're either going to live our lives out in some form of an institution, or we're going to die, or we're going to recover. Those are the three choices of any addiction, and that includes eating disorders. So the family does not have to die along with the eating disorder person. And I have seen many family members give up their life for the eating disorder person, and it doesn't work. Go on with your own life. Put the disease where the disease belongs, and that is on the person. If they don't feel the pain of the disease, they will never want help. And as long as the family is in there rushing in, rescuing them, finding places for them to go to treatment, finding this for them, finding that, rescuing them, letting them come home and live, paying their bills for them, any of that, as long as you're doing that, you're helping them stay sick. And I've always said, if we can get the family, we've got the client. I mean, you see, if we can get the family in there, and that's why a lot of times we'll have had family members to come and do the intensive, and once they do the intensive, they've learned to let go of their loved one. And when you let go of someone with an eating disorder or any addiction, I'm here to tell you the problem needs to be on the person, not the family. The family cannot carry the problem, and the family needs their own help. And is the like, there's some men, and it's not across the board, but there's some men who like for their wives to be overweight because they feel safe. My husband did that. My weight did not bother my husband. I'll tell you what bothered my husband was when I lost the weight and, became, attractive for the first time. I mean, I was thin when I had lost weight. We always joke that when we got married, I didn't know I was marrying a drunk, and he didn't know he was marrying a fat girl. I had lost a lot of weight. I wasn't overweight. I was, pretty thin, and I didn't know he was an alcoholic. So the joke was on both of us, that he preferred me overweight, really, because then he knew that I was safe. No, I wouldn't leave him. No man would want me. Men don't usually like overweight women. But as I lost the weight, it bothered him. I mean, on one hand, he supported me and would compliment me, but on another hand, he got very jealous. And I started to work at a treatment center in town where we treated all men. Well, he hated it. One day he got up, he'd get drunk and buy me something to, get me off his back about the drinking. He'd bought me at that time a new white Lincoln Continental. He got up one morning and he said, "I don't want you to drive my car to work." I said, "What are you talking about? I do not want you to take my car up there where those drunks are." And I said, "Well, okay." So he left, went to work. I got in the car, drove myself to work, because I knew it was his fear. It was his jealousy and his fear. And of course, he was in his own alcoholism. So the family goes through transitions as well as the eating disorder person. And, you know, you think that if you've been overweight and you lose weight, everybody's just going to be, you know, joyful and just love it. They won't all love it because you have been the IP, the identified patient. When you've been the identified patient in the family, whether you are overweight, underweight, bulimic, the focus has been on you. And when you give up being the IP, the identified patient, that family system has to have someone in there that is sick. You watch it, I've never seen it fail. If the family doesn't join the the eating disorder person and get their own help or their own awareness, educate themselves about the eating disorder, if they don't, at least one family member is going to break out in some kind of mental breakdown. And we see it over and over and over again. Because, you know, I'm doing like this, it's a family system. And the family is like a mobile, you know, over a baby's bed. And, you know, everything is level, everything works. You take one of those little animals off and it just goes to like this. I mean, it quits working. We heard this in the field. I mean, I heard it 50 years ago and I've used it ever since because it disrupts this. This is status quo, regardless of how sick it is, everybody's used to it. Are y'all with me? And families of sick that have an addict in their family, they're used to that and they almost demand that there be a sick one in that family system. Y'all don't like to hear that, do you? I have seen it over and over again. If you don't get that family some help and the family doesn't start looking at themselves and quit looking at the eating disorder person or the alcoholic or the drug addict, if they don't take the focus off of them and put it on themselves, I'll tell you, many times the family is far sicker than the addict ever thought about being. Far sicker. So this is why I really encourage family members to get their own help, because when you've made it your life's work to help other people and they start getting better and they don't need you, what happens to you? What happens? What does your life look like? So I have just about worn that one out about family. You can support, you know what, you can support your loved one that has an eating disorder. You know what a supporter is? You know, that I'm a Chiefs fan, I'm a Cowboy fan, but anyway, I've had to kind of switch over to some winning team here. You know, let's say it was the Super Bowl and the Chiefs were down there playing, you know, the Super Bowl game and they did lose, but anyway, how it works is the quarterback gets the ball and the quarterback throws it to the wide receiver. The wide receiver catches the ball and they run it in for a touchdown. And the people in the stands stand up and they clap. That is what supporters are. That's how you support your loved one. You are a supporter. You're not a participant. Do not get down there on that field and try to carry the ball. You're going to make a fool out of yourself, and you will be arrested for getting on the field. And I'm making kind of light of it, but this is what severe codependents do that are so wound up in their loved one's disease that they forget who they are. They quit living their own life and they carry the ball. And I'll tell you, as long as you carry an addict of any sort, whether it's eating disorder, alcoholism, drug addict, the self-centeredness of the disease. I mean, when we're in the disease, we are the most self-centered people in the world. I could not see that in myself. And my sponsor, I told her one day, she said, that is your self-centeredness. And I said, I am not self-centered. I mean, I don't like myself. I don't think highly of myself. I am self-conscious. And I went down the list, and she said, everything that you're saying has self in it. You are focused on yourself, and self-centeredness is thinking too highly of yourself or thinking of yourself less, putting yourself down. Either way, you're all wrapped up in yourself. And when we're all wrapped up in ourselves, we make a poor package. So this is why the family must get their own help. Take your hands off of the addict and love them, care about them, and get on with life. Because unless the eating disorder person, unless the addict of any sort wants help, and I'm talking about codependency too. Codependency and I'm going to be talking about codependency. Codependency is the core of all of this. It is the core. And so, family members must get their own help. And you as a family, I had to absolutely give my daughter up for death. And I mean, I wanted an instant. Look at that little girl. Did you see her? This is our friend Risa, and her little girl's there. Good morning.
I can't get back over there right now.
So, the whole family needs help. It's not just the addict or not the eating disorder person. But the whole family system can recover, but it takes work, and it takes one person, just one person stepping out. And I will tell you, the family may not ever join you. The family may not ever join you in your recovery. And what I mean by that, they can support you in your recovery, but they may not ever look at themselves, and that's all right. I mean, my mom and dad, I'm the only one in my family that ever sought help. And I'll tell you, when you're the one doing that, you're going to get made fun of. They're going to criticize you. They're going to, you name it, and that's what they're going to do. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Take care of yourself. Do it anyway. They're going to make fun of you going to 12-step programs. They're going to make fun of, particularly with eating disorder clients. Well, why are you going to those 12-step programs? I thought that was just for those drugs. They'll say things like that to you. Do it anyway. Do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself. So that's what I have about recovery, and I will tell you, it is possible. If I hadn't, by God's grace and a lot of help from people, there'd be no way I'd be here today. I'd be dead today, because I was suffering from a severe, severe eating disorder. And today I have the freedom. I'll tell you, food will take its proper place in an eating disorder person's life, but right at first, there's got to be a lot of focus on the food and getting your body, completely changed into, we have to connect our brain with the heart. That's an 18-inch journey. And that's what our early recovery does, is connect those two. Okay, that's what I have. I hope it's helpful. Anyone have any questions or comments about, because I know some of you have family members that have eating disorders. Some of you have them yourself. Sally's got her hand up. What?
Tennie, can I make one of the things that when I first came to Sheds, one of my assignments was to read Judy Hollis's book, Fat as a Family. And I found it to be very good, and ended up when I got home, ordered to have my own copy, and I've read that several times. I think it's a good book that she's done.
Have you,
Babbitt's Family, yeah.
did you read my notes? Thank you, Sally. I had this down here and I'd forgot to mention it. In Educating Yourself, Judy's is the best book that you can read on how the family system works with eating disorders. Fat is a family affair.